Hello, today I'm sharing a recording of a live draft analysis of this beautiful 1948 gown, and I did this live on Instagram, so next time why not join me. My name on Instagram is Charlotta_pattern cutting school, and that way you can join in and ask any question. But I do always record it so I can put it on YouTube so you can watch it in landscape, because I know Instagram, the portrait is a bit weird when you're trying to draw something. But I hope you enjoy this analysis. It's about 25 minutes long, and I go into all the details of how it's not a full drafting tutorial, but it analyzes how it actually works, how the shaping is created, how the gathers and the volumes is created, how this beautiful wrap actually works, and of course fabrics, closures, facing, all that fun stuff. I hope you enjoyed. Let's have a look at this 1948 Vogue model, which is number 2494. And if I think it must be based on a designer of a time, because you can see sort of lots of elements you see in fashion of that time, which you quite often find with these Vogue patterns, that they interpret fashion of a time. But let's have a look at how it's all made and put together. So it is a really gorgeous dress. You can see a plain one and a printed one, and I'm going to talk about fabrics in a little while because it's really important, and you can see the back view as well, which is quite plain. So let's start drawing it. I'm just thinking the best way, because it's got a really interesting front with that scarf, which I love because that's sort of really timeless. It's a very vintage detail, but it's also very timeless, and you can style it in lots of different ways, whether you do it sort of daytime, shorter, on a straight dress and stuff. So lots of options there, and I'm glad you like the scarf at the neckline as well, Natalie. So let's start drawing it. I'm going to draw it without the scarf first, just so we can see the silhouette itself. And I think this is it's a repro pattern, so you can still buy it. And what I've always found quite interesting, because if I was making this for myself and I didn't know, I would make this at the front, the opening, and when I would do it, it for example has a little button here, and then it might sort of go like this, and I'm going to draw it in. It's actually not how it works. This is just my best thinking. So I would sort of have a little button here, and then of course this sort of goes on top and becomes the scarf. And it probably has a little bit of volume, but that's how I would have constructed it, because of course when you go up, you got a center front seam which goes down. I think our natural base is around here, and then so at that point when you're drafting, I'm going to talk about on Friday on Patreon, choosing where to put that point is sort of quite important, because if you put it too low, it's not going to look that great. But the dress itself, can you see the whole dress is actually made out of, it has this little panel in the middle which is completely straight, so you can see it's just a rectangle with a little triangle on top, and then there's actually, the front is one long panel. So I think you can see it's, oh actually you can see it here, it's slightly flared, and you can also see it there's some flare. So I think this would make a beautiful daytime dress as well. Do you agree? So it looks something like that. So it's sort of, it needs to be wide enough that you can walk with dresses like that. So if you make it that length, make sure you can actually walk. Of course, this that length, that'd be a fantastic afternoon dress or daytime dress. Or you know what? If you made this in a really nice drapey wool, that'd be a really nice, even like office dress. If you are in a professional occupation, which I am not, but you can imagine that sort of, it's a, you can wear it as a really nice jacket on top. And then we got these tropical darts office time to do some shaping. And then of course we've got the shaping around this area turned into darts, into sorts of little gathers of pleats. Sorry, the darts in your bottom section, so in your skirt, they're being converted into pleats and gathers, and that's what I'm gonna show you how to do it on Patreon. We're sort of talking about amount of volume you create, because I've actually Vintage Release, who has made the proper pattern, she sent me some pattern pieces, which I always find fascinating, because if you draft it yourself, of course the beauty is that you can draft however you want it, but with the pattern envelope, this is actually, it's quite it's not as big a gather as I would have thought, and the side is completely straight, so it's always, sometimes pattern envelopes can be really helpful seeing a pattern pieces, but sometimes it can be really restrictive, because of course none of us are this shape, or most of us are different shape, so for each of us it's going to look completely different. And Jubilant Batter is saying, I was actually thinking of a shorter length for the office. Yes, so thinking, great minds think alike. I think it'd be a really nice, actually all year round office dress, because it's sort of a finished dress, and it's got a nice, so it's just got your normal shoulder point is around here, so you just sort of draw on that sort of joint cap sleeve, and then of course your this is what you sometimes vintage style, so you can see the bust dart has been converted into quite a low, and I've drawn it a bit too angled, but you can see it on here. The bust dart has been converted into that, and I would imagine we also put in some of the waist dart, because there's no waist seam, so it probably isn't skin tight, super fitted, because you have no seam here. So actually I've done it far too low, I apologize. It's like this. So I think the front seam is actually slightly curved like this, so that will create some of your shaping. Then you probably move some of the waist shaping into your bust darts, and also some of the shaping of course comes from the side seam. So this, though of these sort of older styles, they don't, if you know with your block you always have these two, but of course you can then batch things around and add some shaping to the center front and more shaping to the side seam, so you can play around with that. And also what's really important is that it's a really drapey fabric for it to sit this nicely. So if you made this out of a cotton, it'd be quite stiff, so by having like a soft fabric, it's going to sort of drape around your body. As I said at the beginning, I would have done the front with like a button coming like this, and then either have a button closure or something like this. But what they have actually done is made this completely ornamental. So what it actually is that you have a seam up here. So I'm going to try to, and then, so you actually just have a cutout. I think that's how I remember it from Vintage Jollies. It's basically a completely closed front, and then the facing from this scarf basically attaches to either a seam here or a seam there. So it's actually double. Of course, if you don't want to do double, you can use what I'm doing, and then you can always like stitch it shut here, so that this is, I think it's sort of quite nice if this was completely loose all the way down, But of course that's gonna, if you leave it completely loose, this might distort as you're wearing it. So every time your scarf moves, this is gonna, the shape of the diamond might move, you know, as the scarf, as you have to drape it up again. So by fixing it invisibly through the facing, it holds it in place. So what you basically have is one front, which looks like this. This is shaping, and then that extends into our scarf. That's the center front. And then the other side, sorry, this also has a cutout here. So it's like this. So actually one side of your diamond becomes the scarf, and then the other side is, I should have looked it up again. I looked at it a few months ago. The other side has a cutout as well, and then I think it's actually stitched. It's something like this. So it stitches into the shoulder here together and just holds it. So you got like a sort of weird overlap, which is fake. So it's all stitched in place. So it's like a wrap style, back to front. So it actually goes a bit more like that from this side, and then it gets fixed into here. So that's your shoulder seam there. So it sort of goes like this underneath, and then it's just like a sort of normal crew neck. So that's the front. So it's actually easier because it hasn't got any complicated draping. It's literally just like a flat dress, which means it always sits right as well, because that part will hold everything in place, which means your scarf bit won't sort of open up because everything is closed. So I totally understand why I did it this way. Even if you sort of would draft it yourself, you might do it differently. And if you quickly look at the back a bit, the back, you can see it's got the button closure here, and this is of course you would have had zips, but not invisible zips. So I would have probably had a side seam zip as well, you know, like a normal sort of constructed zip of that time, so rather than an invisible zip, which you can put in really well. So at the back, interesting enough, it actually has a waist seam for extra shaping. So the back is quite conventionally shaped. So all the shaping is put through the waist, which has a lovely V shape of that time. And then it's just got a center back seam all the way down. So that is really easy to construct. You just do your normal, I'm going to move it over here so you can actually see it. It's got your normal shaping through your two darts. They just moved the shape of the waist slightly, but the same construction applies. And then they have a shoulder seam as well, a shoulder dart for shaping, so that's quite conventional, very easy to make, straightforward from your block. And then they've got these little buttons, and I think that's just to get your head in and out, because of course at the front, the way they've done it, it's basically a crew neck. It's quite a tight round neck. Oh, and Davy is just saying, I imagine it being made of a nude lipstick colored drapey fabric. Absolutely stunning. Carmen Miranda 2022 version. That sounds absolutely fantastic. Yeah, you can imagine that perfect shape of not quite nude, but it's sort of, maybe is it a caramel or champagne colored? Champagne is a bit too light. Like a caramel colored silk would be actually stunning. And Davey bringing me on to fabric. That's a good reminder. Thank you. I'm really gonna finish off just talking how to get in. So they've put the little really nice decorative buttons at the back, which would be really beautiful. They have loops around it, I would imagine, either fabric or thread loops, which is like a sort of little crochet style. And then I think they actually probably put in a side seam zip. And you could do either. You could either have a center back zip or a side seam. This fabric's like silk, which you make this out of. It can be quite tricky to construct a really beautifully put in zipper. So if you're quite a beginner, in a way, if you have your zip on the left hand side here, then your scarf is sort of obscure where it is. But if it's straight on the center back your zip, then you have to be quite confident in getting a beautifully finished invisible zip, because you don't want your sort of invisible zip ends around here right on your bum, so you don't want puckering basically. So from a construction point, either way works. The nice thing is if you have in the back seam with a zip is of course that you can just step into this dress. So if you like to have a special hairstyle or nice makeup, so if this was for example a wedding dress or a special occasion dress and you had your hair done and your face made up, then you would definitely go for a center back zip and button, so you can just step in and you don't have to worry about your face. But for a daytime dress you can also just put in a side seam zip, and then you have to just put it over your head. So, you know, pros and cons for both. So that's the construction, how to get in and out. Let's quickly talk about fabrics. So the original, as I said, would have been made out of really nice silk. As Davy said, it would look beautiful in a nude lipstick color nowadays. Any sort of drapey silk, and if you make this too stiff, it's basically gonna not give it nice drapey look, because it is sort of quite, it's actually cut, as I had access to the pattern pieces, this is actually all the straight of grain, so it's the opposite, which is quite fascinating, because if you think 10 years earlier, if you think about Madame Violette, this would have been all cut on the bias, which of course would have meant you don't need any of the shaping either. But this is actually all cut on the straight of grain, which was at first a bit surprising, which means your scarf is actually cut on the bias, which gives you a really drapey scarf. But I think it's got a seam in here as well, because it's actually quite, because we got the straight pieces like that, it's actually quite a economical dress. If you think about, it's 1948, so it's just after the war, so it's made of beautiful silk, but it's actually in its design by having these straight panels and then inserting this as well for extra interest. It's actually really economical because you just basically have straight pieces. Oh, and Davy is saying, I once saw a fabric like that caramel one called Peau de Soie. I know exactly what you mean. It's like a peach. It's a peachy silk. It had a bit of stretch. And that's exactly what you want, like a really nice, the peachy silk. I think it's like a peach side and a silky side, so it's really beautiful. And oh, Bob is saying, I made this dress as my mother of a bride outfit for my daughter's wedding. Ooh, I bet you looked amazing. So yeah, so I think it would be a perfect wedding dress or mother of a bride in a print dress for any evening wear, any drapey silk. And oh, Bob is just saying a peach skin fabric, and I think I've got some. Actually, I haven't got any more. I used to have a beautiful nice silk peach skin, but yes, any sort of silk. Silk crepe to sheen would be nice as well. So again, where you have a shiny side and a matte side, for example. And then it would be really nice if you, for example, if you think about tuxedos, menswear, they always have a shiny collar, but here, for example, you could make this in matte and the rest in shiny, or the other way around. And then of course the scarf, if you pin that hem and you have a silk which is shiny on one side, matte on the other side, you're gonna get both sides as you drape it around. So you're really gonna play with how the silk falls. So it's gonna look really beautiful in a plain fabric. It's gonna look nice in a print as well, like how they have done it. In a stripe, it'd be really interesting as well, because of course how you treat the stripe You could have fun with that. And if you made it a daytime dress, for example, if you had a Prince of Wales check, like a wool or something, like a really nice soft drapey wool, that'd be really interesting. Or even maybe a pinstripe. If you think sort of Roland Mouret 2008, that'd be really stunning. So that's the sort of fabric. The drapier, the softer, the better. But because it's cut on the straight of grain, everything, it should actually be pretty easy to make. I think you make the trowel in like a lining fabric just to see how it hangs. The drafting, the most tricky one is probably getting your head around how this works. And you can actually sort of, first of all, for your trowel, just cut two of this, so you have it wrap on the top, and then you just do your scarf on the trowel to see how long you want it and stuff like that. And of course you can omit that panel. You could do a skirt like that, and I think that's what Davy, I think that's what you were thinking about. And again, if like this would be a really nice top, for example, as well for day wear, with just that nice scarf neckline, which I think you like, Natalie. So you could either like a top, you could add a peplum, so it's like something you wear on top of a fitted skirt. You could tuck it into a pair of trousers. In that case, I would make it slightly straighter, so you can just tuck it in, and it'd be a really nice sort of graceful top. And it has that sort of sari. It's reminiscent of that beautiful drape as well. So you could sort of interpret it and make your own of that as well, however you wanted to do. Let's quickly finish off this fabrics. And Natalie, I'm glad you love all these ideas. With things like that, it's sort of some dresses you just see as one, but something like this actually has lots of interesting details, and I love it that this is a clear evening dress, but you can style it down. And quite often I think with evening dresses it's quite easy to pick out bits and pieces and then say, oh, that'd be really good for day wear, because it's such a perfect dress. Let's quickly draw in my facings, and I bought new pens, so I have too much choice. I've got lots of lovely pinks. Let's talk about finishes. So this in the silk, I would imagine it's just got a facing here and here, or alternatively you could add binding to finish it, or a little pin hem. They would all work. And then you could even fully line that scarf. So if it's a really fine fabric, you could line it in self fabric, and that'd be quite a substantial, nice scarf. But otherwise you just create a pin hem to finish it. And then this one, the original, actually has a facing again, so it gives you a really neat finish, and I think that's the best option because we've got that shape. If you try quite a beginner stitching, getting these corners perfect is quite tricky. So what you could do, instead of that diamond, you could actually just do like a sort of eye-shaped one, because of course that's your seam up there, this is hidden, and then the curve is easier to stitch together. And that's actually this bit here, if you get that wonky, it's really drawing everybody's eyes. So you have to, that's sort of where I would spend some time, I would practice and actually measure everything and make sure everything is perfect, because I've done it before where it's just, I think I did it where the fabric, the straight of something was just slightly wrong, but half a mil, but it draws your eyes straight away. So just take your time doing that. Then it's got probably either French side seams or normal side seams, which is just overlocked or zigzagged. This panel here, I'm going to talk about on Friday in the drafting tour a bit more, but you got different options whether you face it or whether you do normal seams, again depending on your fabric. And again, these corners, of course, you have to sort of sew them really precisely, get really beautiful finish, or slightly curve them here as well. These are all squares, which is doing over time, but if you curve it slightly, it's much easier. And then the hem, probably because it's slightly on the curve, it either has a grown on facing, which is sort of ironed and steamed in, or it's got a separate facing, or again you could do really like a pin hem, but I would sort of do an invisible. I think a dress that's beautiful working with silk, you'd either do invisible hand stitched seams, or if you're very good at the sewing machine, it looks beautiful. If you have very narrow pin hems, it looks quite stunning. And in the back, of course, it will have a facing here again, and then it either has the invisible zip or the side seam zip visible, either invisible or just put in. But this is my interpretation of the 1948 2494, which I'm not sure if it's a reprint. But yeah, if it says Vogue Vintage, it's a reprint. But the original design was from 1948. So I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you so much for all your suggestions. I loved hearing about all the silk and also about the Mother of a Bride dress, which I would also love to see, Bob. And 150847 words. I am giving online training on Patreon, and the best thing is if you just follow the link in my bio and it leads to my website, and there's a section on Patreon with a membership. And I've also got some courses for things like bodice blocks and a really good darts beginner course. And don't forget, everybody, if you want to join my Patreon, you're going to look at the skirt part of this on Friday for a full drafting tutorial on how to create with really nice gathering. And of course, it's a special offer this week only, and that will be the last time I'm doing this offer, because in autumn something really exciting is happening. So if you join my Patreon now, you be there for autumn already. So thank you so much for joining me.